You like podcasts? Oh, I like podcasts. Get the TYT podcast. Get the whole show and TYT interviews and old school and aggressive, progressive. So many wonderful TYT shows. No ads. Become a member right now. TYTnetwork.com/join. Awesome day at the Young Turks. Wasiktilan, drop it. Power panel. Richard Fowler from the Richard Fowler Show is here.
Yo.
Yes.
That clap, by the way, was not his new way of dropping it. We have flies in the studio. This place is disgusting.
We do, but that was also a new way of dropping it. All right, John Iadarola is here. There is a story today in the news about Jason Pie, not to be confused with Johnny Pie, who will be presenting that story. Jason Pie is a really bad dude from Freedom Works at Koch brothers group. I hope we get to that story. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are close to getting him. Look, there's this 1,000 stories. No, but one day, hopefully him too.
Pastor Pie!
No, it's gonna be like Sigtila. Okay. Anyway, so 1,000 stories today. They're all amazing. And the Louis C.K., you got Roy Moore, that's coming up in a second. You got an insane kidnapping that Mike Flynn was considering doing of a Turkish American. Wasiktilan, was it me? Well, that might be next one day. But anyway, but mainly what I'm telling you is we're close to Trump, man. Mueller is getting closer and closer and closer to Trump. So, it's exciting times, Yeah. And if you're one,
or a gigantic distraction.
Oh yeah, of course.
One of those two things.
Yes. Sure. Okay, getting rid of the worst president we've ever had, I would say, is a little bit more than a distraction. Now, let us note for the record that this might be the first time we've ever had 3 T-shirt blazer combos on the panel. It's just a thing that must be noted.
And they're all face shirts too. So
they are, yeah.
We have Bernie over there. We have FDR and Bayard Rustin. We're winning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cenk, before the show, changed into that to try to avoid what I'm going to tell you now. We wore the same T-shirt today originally.
Again.
Every time I wear this shirt, he wears the same shirt.
Okay, anyway, but this is my favorite. So that's wonderful, and that's so cool, actually, but that's not at shoptyt.com.
So take it off.
Okay.
Well, if you guys make a Bayard Rustin shirt, and Richard Fowler will be the first one to buy it.
Okay, excellent. But this is one of my favorites. This is the resist line we have. And so this is obviously with FDR, so I love this one. ShopTYT.com. All right, let's get to it.
Okay, lots to get to today. Although many Republican politicians are at least tentatively denouncing Roy Moore with a lot of ifs and possiblies and we'll sees in the wake of the allegations that he engaged in multiple relationships with underage girls, including the molestation of a 14-year-old. Those are the allegations. Conservative media still largely has his back, as they did yesterday. For the second day running, Breitbart, the whole front page this is a huge smear job by Amazon, Bezos, Illuminati. All of that. Remember, this is the outlet that was pushing the Pizzagate conspiracy. They were really worried about politicians abusing young children before. Now they don't seem to have as big of an issue with it.
When it's real.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're also going to turn to the conservatives on cable news as well. We're going to have some video for you. But before we get to that, Sean Hannity actually spoke with Roy Moore today, and we don't have the video or the full transcript yet, but some of it was being live tweeted, so let's talk about a few of those revelations, because Moore said a lot of stuff. He said that he admits to knowing 2 of the 16 to 18-year-old women named in the Washington Post article, saying, quote, he dated a lot of young ladies then, which he said as a defense. I don't know that actually is much of a defense, really. I dated tons of questionably young people.
Yeah, so
but he does remember them.
But I think he also, I want to say in the interview, because I heard some bits of it. He also said that he asked their parent, he talked to their mother for approval first, or he asked their parents for approval, so it was okay.
Yeah. So, so is that knowing them in the biblical sense? I hope not. And so saying that, yeah, he dated young women back then and he knew those 2 basically is admitting the charges that he claimed were lies and smears. And he even did a fundraising email that we'll tell you about in a second where he called them lies. Apparently they weren't lies because you basically just admitted it.
He denies the 14-year-old.
Yeah, the
Still.
16 to 18-year-old. Now I'm coming around to that point, which is important, which is that the legal age of consent in Alabama is 16, so those would have been legal. And gentlemanly, if you ask their parents and you're in your mid-30s and you like to date 16-year-olds, and I will have to find out if the great state of Alabama's okay with that. As John pointed out, Pizzagate, et cetera, people were very concerned of politicians dating very young people. But unless they're really Christian and really good Christians, in which case making out with 16-year-olds when you're in your mid-30s is apparently awesome. But we'll find out soon enough, probably in the election.
You're just emulating the example of Joseph. Now, he also said, asked whether he had dated girls as young as 16. He says, "I don't dispute that."
In other words, yes, yes.
And and if you combine that with "I dated a lot of young girls," then that totally does not mean that you dated younger than 16, and it certainly doesn't mean that you tried to date younger than 16. But if you're routinely going around trying to scope out 16, 17, 18-year-old girls, it's possible you might have hit one younger than that at some point. So again, these are supposed to be defenses of him. He also said, "I'm sure in the next 4 weeks they're going to come out with another article."
In other words, he dated
exciting.
a lot of young girls back in the day. Wait till you get a load of the rest of them.
Well, and so we're like a little bit joking, but like, yeah, when these things come out, it makes other people feel comfortable perhaps talking, and so it's not impossible that more could. Also, Roy Moore says that he has, quote, evidence of collusion, but didn't say what that was or what the evidence would be. I guess the idea being that these people who are making these allegations about him, that he says almost all the details are true, but he didn't do anything wrong. The 14-year-old, by the way, as we said on the show yesterday, voted for Donald Trump, has voted for Republicans in the last 3 presidential elections, has not worked with the Democratic Party or the Democratic opponent in this race, is involved in collusion to try to take him down. And so that's today. We're gonna have some more video of the defense of him, but what do you guys think about this defense?
Okay, so first of all, when he says collusion, what he probably means is that it was Oppo research and then given to the Washington Post, which happens all the time. Okay, that is real, it happens.
Why wouldn't Luther Strange have used this?
Luther Strange did try to use this. He apparently didn't have the 14-year-old because he had an ad that was referencing how lenient Roy Moore was in a case of child rape and sodomy.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday.
Yeah. So it wasn't specifically this, but he might have been just hitting him on the decision, on the judicial decision, where Roy Moore is like, I mean, was there really?
There's no evidence of harm.
Yeah, evidence of harm when one was forcibly sodomized. I think the kid was under 12, right? And so it was a preposterous, insane ruling. And maybe Strange was just hitting him on that, or he might have known this stuff but didn't have enough, and was referencing that in that ad. But if the Oppo research and pointing out that it's Oppo research is fair. The Republicans saying, hey, it's interesting that it's coming out right before the election. That's fair. But then the more important question is, did he do it? In the case of the 16 and aboves, he's now admitting basically that he did do it. On the 14-year-old, if you didn't hear the story earlier, he took off all his clothes, he got her in her underwear, fondled her, and tried to get her to touch his crotch. Well, that would be illegal. And so now some of the defenses of other Alabama Republicans are, well, as John was kind of alluding to, Joseph and did it to Mary, so why not? Literally, that's a Republican politician in Alabama.
The comptroller of Alabama made that comment.
Yeah, he said it doesn't sound immoral or illegal. Well, no, actually, if it's true, it's completely illegal. I don't know if the statute of limitations has run on it, but it's not a good excuse for why you did it.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think the other argument, I guess they could be saying there's collusion, and you heard Steve Bannon make this argument, sort of saying this Jeff Bezos, Amazon-owned Washington Post. But I think that argument, collusion, doesn't make any sense if you understand at all how newsrooms work at a newspaper, where the editorial and the business side of newspaper are very separate from the hardworking journalists at every outlet, right? So you have the editorial people who make their editorial decisions of who they're going to endorse and who they're not going to endorse, and good beat reporters who are covering a story. And in this particular story, there are 30 sources, not 1, not 2, not 10. There's 30 different sources on this one. And it has nothing to do with who the paper endorsed, has nothing to do with what the editorial board did, it has everything to do with a good journalist getting Oppo research and then doing their own research and saying we have 30 sources. So debunk all 30 of them, and then let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and not opening themselves up to possible legal action. Like
Absolutely.
They will check and double check and triple check to make sure that this is true.
And that is exactly why they might not have had it in time for the primary or any other race that he ran, because it takes a ton. Because you don't want to make these charges and be proven wrong. That would be disastrous.
Yeah, look at Rolling Stone.
Yeah, so they had to button it up with 30 sources before they went to print it, and that's why the guys like John McCain have said, yeah, good enough. He should step down.
Yeah.
While other Republicans in the Senate are like, well, what if they had 31 sources? So I'm not yet convinced.
If it turns out that these allegations are true, and if he has already been sworn in and voted for the tax bill, then he should step down. But yeah, so look, John McCain doing the right thing, saying he should step down. Mitt Romney, after it matters, since he has no power, saying the same thing. But a lot of Republican politicians don't. They want to leave themselves some room possibly to allow himself to still win. And as I was saying, a lot of conservative media have just decided that screw all that we've said about family values and caring about this sort of thing. They are not just going to, if it's true more, they are going to attack everyone making these allegations. And Sean Hannity has decided to let the uranium cool off for a couple of days, and so he's turned to this story and is spending all of his time on it. So we're gonna show you a few videos. First, here he is with a legal analyst.
And this goes back to what you said. Do people do it for money? Do they do it for political reasons? Is that more common than people would think?
Oh, definitely. I mean, they'll do this for
they will lie to make money.
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, there are individuals that will come forward with these outrageous allegations, and then
that hurts all women that are victims.
Yes, I mean, and that's what I used to work in sex crimes in the DA's office. It was very pitiful to see that, because some jurors don't believe it, because they've in their own lives, there are people that have made these accusations for money. You see this time and time and time again. And sexual harassment, that term is coined everywhere. Frankly, the laws are very clear as to what it takes in order to be a violation of the law. You have to have some sort of damage. And these individuals, a lot of these women, it's all about money, and they bank on the fact that these corporations have
this
the
is where you
reputation
thread the
that they
needle,
want to
because
save.
there are women that are victims of predators.
Yes, there are.
So hard.
But very few, far between.
Few and far between.
So that is, of course.
What conversation have we been having nationally about sexual abuse and sexual harassment? Few and far between.
No, it's interesting. When Harvey Weinstein was accused of these sexual predators, this is dangerous and horrible and horrific. Now, when it's Roy Moore, and they were right about that, and when it's Roy Moore, and it was Trump back in the day, and of course, most importantly for Fox, Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly. Few and far between. I mean, most of them are lying. Most of them are goddamn liars. There's a tiny, tiny fraction that are telling the truth, but most of them are whores looking for the money. By the way, this is legal analyst from Fox News. So they bring on women to bash other women.
So I know this analyst. And I'll say this. I think that she is right. People are falsely accused. I think people go after corporations to get settlements, so on and so forth. But this case is uniquely different for a lot of reasons. Number one, there's nothing to get from Roy Moore. Number two, this lady put her name out there. She put her whole reputation on the line. And so clearly, most of the time they do it, they would sue, they would try to get a settlement, and they would try to make it all go away in the shadow of darkness with some gag order. She didn't do that at all. She went to the paper and said, I think that the voters of Alabama deserve to know the truth about this guy, which makes this case different from somebody going after a Harvey Weinstein, who's like, I'm going after him because he's a millionaire and I want some of his money. Mind you, in this case, we know Harvey Weinstein's a total creep. But in this particular, I just think they're wrong on this one, right? There's 30 sources. She put her name out there. She's a Trump supporter, and she thinks this guy is wrong, and the people of Alabama shouldn't elect him. And I think that it's sad that Republicans, who's supposed to be the party of God and the party of moral superiority, as they would argue, are not disavowing this guy as fast as possible. They're like, oh, well, like the comptroller said, well, Mary and Joseph did it, so it's all right to do it in 2017.
Well, so in the case of Mercedes Colwin, who's the so-called legal analyst there, look, she's a partner at a law firm, Gordon and Reese. I hope to God they don't have her on some sort of committee that judges sexual harassment claims, because I guess she's trying to cover for Roy Moore, who, according to all these sources of the Washington Post, has molested a 14-year-old, so I hope she feels proud. But not just in that case, but for her to come out on TV and say most of the people who accuse men of sexual harassment are liars, that is not remotely true. and then say most of them are doing it for money. What do you mean most of them? Most of them aren't doing it against Bill Cosby or Roger Ailes. Most women who report sexual harassment have to deal with that at work and on a much lower level, and they're not trying to cash in. Look, is there cases where people lie about it? Of course, there's humanity. There's cases all over the place. But it is not the overwhelming percentage, and if she's on some sort of committee, it seems like she would prejudge all the women negatively. Yeah. So it's horrific.
Well, I think it's not just convenient in this case where they want Roy Moore to win, and it's not just generally more convenient because of the situation they have at Fox News, where multiple people in front of and behind the camera have already gone down for this, and other cases are continuing in the background, like Gretchen Carlson's and stuff like that. But it's also just generally philosophically convenient for the sort of person that makes up their core audience, is that just the 85-year-old man who misses the good old days when you could treat your secretary the way you wanted to. And they're all just lying. Why are they taking it so seriously? But there's more that we want to show you on this. Let's go to this next. It's gonna be Greg Jarrett again, focusing on the credibility of those making these claims and the outlet where it's coming from.
You're not a fan of Judge Moore. You said it the other day on this program.
I did, before the primary, actually, that he is unfit to serve in the U.S. Senate because not once but twice he was removed from office for defying federal judicial decisions on constitutional matters, which he is not allowed to do under the Supremacy Clause. Having said that, I am suspicious of this because of the source, the Washington Post, which has a dog in this fight, having endorsed his opponent. The timing of it on the eve of an election. And finally, he was a huge and has been a huge public figure in Alabama, the best known son of Alabama in many ways, and yet none of this came to surface in almost 4 decades. And so that gives me reason to question the credibility of these people.
So here's the thing. So he's a huge figure. He's been involved in all these other races. It's been 4 decades. How could you wait 4 decades? Okay, so 10 years ago he runs for something. How could you bring it up after 2 decades? You're gonna bring this up. Well, what if you let a long weekend go by, suddenly it's not a crime anymore at that point? And the suspicious thing that it's coming from the Washington Post, as if these women had come to Fox News, they would have taken it seriously and they would have broken the story after checking it, which they wouldn't have done. I mean, really fast. And then that the women are coming out that they're trying to get something. As you said, there's no evidence they're trying to get anything. I saw a tweet from a woman who commenting on the general thing that's going on in our culture is that all of these women are just coming forward for all the free death threats. Like, that's all you get, is you get death threats and rape threats, and that's it. It's brave to come forward. They're not being paid off.
So a couple things. I think they're really great journalists at Fox News. That if they had come to Fox, I think Fox would have reported it.
I think Shep would have reported it.
I think there are good journalists that would have reported this story. Number one. Number two, I think my larger problem with this is I think in Greg's sort of reporting there, he speaks of the problem. This guy was a huge figure in Alabama. That is why this young lady probably took so long to come forward. There's a power element here, and that's what makes these cases so difficult. In most of these cases, and I think, Cenk, you're right, and you said before we watch the clip that, you have to remember that this type of harassment and assault happens at, the toppest of top companies, and it also happens at your local Wendy's, right, and your local McDonald's. So, but it's always a power dynamic that happens. So yes, he's a huge figure in Alabama, which is why you would be scared as a woman who is a random Joe or a random Jane to come forward. And eventually you say, because all these women are now saying, be fierce, be brave, be bold, #MeToo, that I am now going to be bold and I'm going to come forward and I'm going to tell my story. And hopefully people will believe my story on its merits. And when she told her story, if you look at the Washington Post reporting, they're like, we're not really sure if we believe your story on face, so we're going to go out and we're going to find 29 other sources to make sure and confirm that your story is true. And so that's why I think this case is distinct and apart from other cases. I do think people are falsely accused. I do think there should be space for those who are falsely accused to tell their story so it could be a cautionary tale to other men so they don't make the same mistake. But in this particular case, there are 29 other sources beside this young lady, including court records that show that the time and place where they met up is actually the time and place because there was actually a court custody custody hearing that day. So there's real evidence here that proves that this actually could have happened. And the fact that Republicans outside of the Fox News stratosphere, but Republicans, the president of the United States, the fact that Jerry Falwell, the head of Liberty University, which is supposed to be, they are supposed to be the closest thing. It's supposed to be Liberty University and then heaven, right? The fact that he is saying that, oh, well, these are all false. I don't believe the Washington Post. And I'm like, wait a minute, but what happens to all the women who go to Liberty University? Are you going to stand up for these women when they come forward and they tell their stories? How do you guys handle sexual assault and sexual harassment on your campus? I mean, these are the questions that you have to now ask yourselves about what's really going on here. And if they are supposed to have the moral high ground, then where is the moral high ground?
Yeah, so a couple of things about that. First of all, look, every time there's a story like this, Fox News that affects conservative, Fox News comes out about, how about all the people who are falsely accused? I don't think that every time there's a crime, we have to have an enormous conversation about all the people who do false accusations. And I know that because if you watch Fox News, whenever a liberal is accused, there's no conversation about false accusations. When they covered Harvey Weinstein over and over again, there was not. But on the other hand, there's a lot of false accusations so you never know about Harvey. I didn't remember those caveats when Fox News covered that. Only when Republicans and conservatives molest little kids, all of a sudden, remember there's also false accusations. It could be false. So it's a total squirrel move to try to distract you. Of course there are false accusations across the world and everything. We don't have to say that every time because they're trying to get you to think, no, it's probably not true because we want this guy to win even though he's a child molester. Okay, second of all, Greg Jarrett says Washington Post has a dog in this fight because they want his opponent to win. How about Fox News? You guys don't have a dog in the fight? You think Sean Hannity doesn't have a dog in the fight? He has a child molester in the fight. That's who he has. And then third of all, oh, well, why didn't they come forward before? Because you guys would have bashed them just like you are right now. You would have gone after the 14-year-old and the 16 and the 18-year-old just like you are now. And you would have said, oh man, there's all these false accusations. And look at these people trying to, do collusion and what do they want anyway? And Fox News just had somebody on just saying like, oh, most of these women are lying anyway. Gee, I wonder why they didn't come forward earlier. Because you would have tried to crush them as we visibly see you doing right now.
Yeah, actually this is not a Fox News thing, but I'm not even gonna say his name. There's a prominent conservative on Twitter who doxed one of the women, actually put her personal information in a tweet, eventually took it down because he was worried he was gonna get banned from Twitter, but that happened as well. And while all this is going on, some aspects of the Republican Party are distancing themselves from more. The Republican Party's Senate campaign wing severed its fundraising agreement with Moore. And the White House has commented on the issue. Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, like most Americans, the president believes we cannot allow a mere allegation, in this case one from many years ago, to destroy a person's life. However, the president also believes that if these allegations are true, Judge Moore will do the right thing and step aside. I noticed that that's will do the right thing, not should do the right thing and step aside. But by the way, and this just in the background, we're still weeks away from the actual race. Polls over the past month have generally put Moore up by about like 8 to 9 points or something like that. And this is not exactly one of the most high profile polling outfits, but a poll from yesterday had Doug Jones down only 0.4, 46.4 to 46. Who knows what that will look like in a week or let alone in 3 weeks, but this could have an effect on the race.
I tend to agree. I agree. I think it's going to have an effect on the race. And I got to say this, I know the Fox News audience very well. I've been there for some time. I think the Fox News audience is a lot smarter than this. And I think the Fox News audience, they read this story and they see it for what it is. And I think they can sniff out a BSer when they see a BSer.
So you think they won't buy what Hannity? No,
I mean, I think the polls speak to that. I think the polls speak to the people of Alabama are saying, wait a minute. And mind you, we haven't seen any polling done since this revelation has happened.
Yeah,
right?
From like a really big
pollster, a credible pollster who could go down there in Alabama and do some polling. And I think that what you're going to see is people are going to be like, I can't vote for this guy. And I think you're going to see respectable Republicans and respectable independents in Alabama say, I'm either one, going to sit at home and I'm not going to vote at all because I won't vote for a Democrat, or I'm going to vote for a Democrat and vote for Doug. I can't remember his last name.
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones in this particular.
Or potentially write someone in.
Or write in Donald Duck. Just don't vote for this guy.
I like your optimism. I know JR on the show yesterday said he thought Moore would climb in the polls after this. I don't know that I agree with that, but I am worried about in a week. Are we going to see a poll where Doug Jones is up by 2 points. I mean, there's a lot of people in this country who hate the Democratic Party so much that they might still vote for, even if they believe he's a pedophile, they might still vote for him. So I don't know. I mean, we have to wait and see. We can predict all we want, but
I have.
You might be right.
Maybe I have more faith in the American people that they're going to be like, there's no way we could vote for a pedophile. There's no.
I hope you're right.
I mean, my thought, and maybe it's just me. My thought is that there's no father out there who has a daughter who could vote for this man.
No, almost every Republican in Alabama. So I totally disagree with you.
Republicans, Alabama, please prove me right and prove Cenk wrong.
Okay, so Richard, I love your perspective, and it's important to have different perspectives. My perspective is that that Republicans don't care about family values at all. The people who care about family values the least in this country are Fox News viewers. If you give them, Desjardins in Tennessee, 3 abortions. He's a pro-life Republican. 3 abortions. I forget if it was 2 with the mistress and 1 with the wife, or 2 with the wife and 1 with the mistress. But he said, but I had to because I had a mistress. So according to not my language, your language, Fox News, and Republicans in Alabama and Tennessee and all over the place, he murdered those 3 kids because it was convenient for him to do it. But you didn't care. You didn't care at all. You reelected him. So you're not going to care about it. Trump molested those women. It's on tape. He said you grab them by the genitals. You don't ask for permission. You didn't care. You've shown time and time again, all of your talk about family values is a gargantuan lie. As long as there's a Republican who hates the same people you hate, you love him and you don't care that he molests 14-year-olds. You don't care that he sexually assaults people. You don't care how many abortions he had with his mistress or his wife, or as you would put it, the babies he murdered. You don't care. Just admit it. Say Roy Moore hates the same people I hate. I'm going to vote for him no matter what. So I would be shocked if all of the defense that right now Alabama Republicans are doing and Fox News is doing didn't work. Now, I think that Roy Moore might have a better chance of winning now. I'm telling you, Alabama Republicans have no interest in morality. They have 0% interest.
Prove him wrong and prove me right.
As I've said before, one of the downsides of Cenk going away for a week is that he comes back tired and not invested in the story.
So let me tell you about Republicans in Alabama. Alabama State Representative Ed Henry says that these girls, now women, were foolish for coming forward and they'd regret going down this road. And then he wondered, why didn't they come out earlier? Maybe because you just threatened them by saying, you'll regret coming down this road.
He said they should be prosecuted.
Okay. He said they should be prosecuted, and he said they are guilty. They are guilty for allowing him to exist for 40 years. He's not guilty for existing for 40 years. He's not guilty for molesting the 14-year-old. They're guilty for getting molested. Alabama Republicans don't care about morality. They think morality's a punchline. They think it's a political gimmick. That's Alabama Republican State Representative Ed Henry. Alabama State Auditor Jim Ziegler said, even if you accept the Washington Post report as being completely true, it's much ado about very little. I mean, this is assuming, according to his own words, that Roy Moore got naked in his mid-30s with a 14-year-old, just stripped her down to her underwear and fondled her. Much ado about very little. It's something Alabama Republicans apparently, according to their own words, think is no big deal. I mean, who doesn't do that, right? He said, well, Moore married someone 14 years younger and it's fine. Moore happened to just date teenage girls in his 30s. What's the big deal? These are Ziegler quotes. He said, Joseph and Mary. Mary was a teenager. Joseph was an adult carpenter. They became parents of Jesus. There's nothing immoral or illegal here, so that's fine. So Ziegler and other Alabama Republicans think child molestation of 14-year-olds, because he said he accepts the fact pattern. Child molestation, pedophilia is no big deal, according to Republicans who are elected in the state of Alabama, and they will not be thrown out of office. You think Ziegler's going to be thrown out of office for saying pedophilia is awesome and biblical? No, he's going to get reelected. Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill questions the timing and the source of the allegations, and the list goes on and on. They don't care. They've never cared. In fact, they might rally to him and go, oh, good Christian, just molesting a 14-year-old, and now he's in trouble.
I mean, look, honestly, after the results on Tuesday, when you had, the guy who insulted the women's marcher, a woman who marched there went and took his seat, the guy who put the bathroom bill forward, the guy who was attacking the refugees. Like, there's some chance that Ziegler should watch out, and one of the victims might run against him right now.
I mean, that's the point. I mean, Jack, maybe I have a larger hope in the American people, and I have
of the American people, but not of Alabama Republicans.
Well, and I have a larger hope in the Alabama people, and I wrote a piece for Huffington Post talking about how important it is that we people who are of faith, who aren't necessarily of the conservative ilk, reclaim our religion and reclaim this doctrine that they put out here. Because even if you buy this Joseph and Mary malarkey, because it's malarkey, you have to remember that even when they got together, it was a virgin birth and was an immaculate conception, and so they really didn't get together for at least the first year and a half of their relationship. To be very frank, if you look at the biblical pattern, so it doesn't even make sense if you want to. So that's why it's very important that you understand the fact pattern, you read the Bible for yourself in the writing in red. But I actually do believe, and I think John has a point, if you look at the Danica Marshall race that we saw in Manassas, Virginia, where the trans bathroom guy, after 4 decades of being an awful, racist, homophobic legislator, finally a trans woman beat him by not talking about being a trans woman. She beat him on the issues because she was like,
about traffic and
there's traffic because the 28 in Manassas, and I've taken the 28 in Manassas, it's awful. And she's like, it's bad. And people are like, yeah, she might be trans, but she's right. That 28 is bad, and I'm voting for her.
One last thing about Ziegler. Because he didn't just mention Joseph and Mary. So it's an interesting biblical point you make, but he also mentions Zechariah and Elizabeth. And he says Zechariah was extremely old to marry Elizabeth, but they became parents of John the Baptist. So isn't that wonderful? He also quoted Muhammad.
There was also an immaculate conception.
Okay, is that true? There's a lot of immaculate conceptions going on. That might be Roy Moore's dispense next. When the new articles drop, as he hinted on Hannity's show, he might say, oh, no, it wasn't me doing it. It was God doing it.
I mean, the Bible talks about the fact that she couldn't give birth, and then they prayed, and then the baby quaked. There's a whole, read the Bible for yourself, people, before you listen to these quacks.
And what's interesting is that Ziegler also said that Muhammad marrying a 9-year-old was no big deal either. Oh, no, right. All the Christians, good Christians, always talk about, Muhammad's a pedophile. Which is, by the way, I left Islam. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think that, I think that story in the Quran is deeply, deeply disturbing. Then they turn to similar stories in the Bible, and they're like, those are good Christians. When the good Christians do pedophilia, it's awesome. It was God's meaning, okay? When the Muslims do it, oh, Muslims, pedophilia. Oh, look at Joseph and Mary. Pedophilia is awesome. God loves pedophilia. Make up your goddamn minds. Okay?
It was also like...
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
10 centuries ago.
Okay.
For the record.
Okay, no, because they are the world's largest hypocrites.
Why did they take 10 centuries to come forward?
Why? Why did they do it? Okay, all right. We got to take a break. We're done with Roy Moore. When we come back, the walls are closing in on Trump from the Mueller probe. Amazing story. This idiot Flynn might have actually literally tried to plan a kidnapping in America and he got bribed apparently by the Turkish government. That is an amazing story when we return. right, love it. Grace Baldridge is here. Pop Trigger, Murder with Friends. Simone Boyce is here. KTL 5. Morning News. So great to have you, Simone. We've never been on together.
I know. Finally, man. You've been hiding from me.
I've been ducking and weaving, but I'm here now. Grace has breaking news for you in a second. I have been so hectic I didn't get a chance to read your tweets. We'll do that the next segment. But I did want to tell you, I did tease a story about this guy named Jason Pye as opposed to Johnny Pye. He works for the Koch brothers at Freedom Works. And he said it was unacceptable not to have the corporate tax cuts immediately. So that is unsurprising that the Koch brothers would want their tax cuts as soon as possible, and find it insane that the Republicans would delay it for even 1 year. How dare they? What did we bribe you all for? Okay. Now, we're going with the breaking news first, Grace?
No, we're going to go into that second.
Okay, gotcha.
But we have a whole lot coming up in this second hour, so let's just get right into it.
Okay.
Louis C.K. has released a statement following the New York Times piece that detailed sexual abuse and misconduct by the comedian. He says, in part, these stories are true. At the time, I said to myself that what I did was okay because I never showed a woman my dick without asking first, which is also true. But what I learned later in life, too late, is that when you have power over another person, asking them to look at your dick isn't a question, it's a predicament for them. The power I had over these women is that they admired me, and I wielded that power irresponsibly. I also took advantage of the fact that I was widely admired in my and their community, which disabled them from sharing their story and brought hardship to them when they tried because people who look up to me didn't want to hear it. I didn't think that I was doing any of that because my position allowed me not to think about it. I deeply regret that this has brought negative attention to my manager, Dave Becky, who only tried to mediate a situation that I caused. I brought anguish and hardship to the people at FX who have given me so much, The Orchard who took a chance on my movie, and every other entity that has bet on me through the years. I've brought pain to my family, my friends, my children, and their mother. The fallout from the piece by the Times and these allegations coming forward is that Netflix has dropped their plans to air a Louis special. Also, in less than 24 hours since the Times broke its story, CK has been cut loose by his film distributor, by HBO, and now by Netflix. FX, the current home of CK, produced better things than the original airing network of Louis, issued a statement that said the allegations were, quote, under review, and that the network was troubled by what came to light in the Times. Also, The Orchard has announced that they will not be moving forward with the release of the film I Love You, Daddy. Just a very short statement from them, ending with a thank you. Now, I want to get a response from this panel, but what I want to do first is just to break down a little bit about his statement that he released. We read it just in part, but if you read the full thing, you'll see words there like remorseful, reconcile, regret. A combination of words you won't see is I'm sorry or I apologize. What I think is important to remember is that this acknowledgement is a result not of his own reflection on the situation. It is a result of us now knowing about these allegations that the New York Times have published. This is evidence because in early September, the New York Times asked him directly at a press junket about the allegations, probably knowing full well that they were going to be releasing the story. And when CK was asked about it then, before the Harvey Weinstein piece, before public opinion had swayed, he says, quote, if you actually participate in a rumor, you make it real. When pressed further on that, he said, they're rumors, that's all it is. So obviously just a straight up lie. Now, with that said, I want to toss to you guys. This is obviously incredibly disgusting, and just chime in, guys.
Okay, so
I will say, I was talking to Simone before I went tape. I'm really heated about this.
Yeah, as you should be. That's the correct response.
Okay.
Well, we're going to have a range of opinions on it, so this could get interesting. Okay, here's what I need clarification on, Grace. To what degree did they have power over these 5 different women?
Okay. So in the late 1990s, there was an anonymous woman who was working on a television show of which he was a producer and a writer. She was working in production. And then in 2002, Dana Goodman, Julia Wallov, they were performers at a U.S. Comedy Arts Festival. They referred to their coming onto this festival as their, quote, big break. CK was a featured performer there. So that means he's top billed. He's not their boss necessarily, but he wields more power in that situation. 2003, Abby Shockner was an up-and-coming comedian who called called Louis, who was at that time a staff writer on Cedric the Entertainer's show, to invite him to a gig. He then responded to that by masturbating over the phone while he was talking to her. And then in 2005, Rebecca Corey was on a pilot. Louis was the guest star on that pilot when he asked her if he could masturbate in front of her.
Okay. So I have a range of opinions on those things, and so, but we're all here, we're all discussing. So first, one thing I liked was his flat-out admission at this point, which is usually half measures. Harvey Weinstein with if I did anything, fine, I feel bad about that, but I'm now going to fight the NRA, which is random and a horrible non-apology. Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, the worst of the worst in terms of not admitting it, etc. He just comes out and says, I did it. So that was a tiny bit refreshing. On the other hand, Grace is absolutely right. He was caught. He never said he did it before he was caught.
He flat out denied it before he was caught.
And he denied it before. And so, unlike Bill Clinton, he didn't go around smearing all of the people that had accused him of it. That's another big difference. But his manager, according to some of the charges, tried to dissuade people from coming forward. That's bad. Okay.
And when we say his manager, it is perhaps the most powerful manager in the comedy world, which is incredibly insular, very protective. They protect their own. So it's not just any manager. I know it's sort of like, oh, he has a manager. Dave Becky represents Aziz Ansari, Amy Poehler, and other big names that I'm blanking on. 3 Arts Entertainment is huge in the comedy world to be represented. So he was a powerful man represented by an equally, if not more powerful man in Hollywood.
So, but I want to be clear. Because now every one of these new revelations puts in the same sentence as Weinstein and Cosby and all those guys, right? And I don't think that this one belongs in that category. And again, you guys tell me why I'm wrong on this. But it seems like the only one he didn't ask consent of was the one on the phone. Now, he asked for consent on all the other ones, which I think is enormously important. Now, did he abuse a position of power? The answer seems to be kind of in some of those situations. So none of these women directly worked for him. Now that's not a complete blanket excuse, okay? He did have more power than them in some of the places where they co-worked, and so that is really relevant. But if you just get into Louis C.K. is a really powerful guy, and hence by definition, even asking for consent and then making a woman uncomfortable in a situation where there's a misunderstanding or whatever, to me, that's not a crime at all. That's nothing. So when they work together, it's a different and complicated dynamic. So that's my take on it.
He even acknowledged that just him asking for consent to do this in that situation puts women in a compromising position just because he's Louis C.K. and they are not.
So Simone, I hear you, but let's draw the lines here, and and this is all just our opinions. But if is he so powerful he's not allowed to ask to have any kind of sexual relation with anyone? That's crazy. That can't be the standard. But they work together.
Why did he address it in his statement? Why did he say that I knew that I had power over these women who admired me, and I wielded that power irresponsibly? He himself says that was irresponsible in the way that he did it. I don't disagree that powerful people can have sex with less powerful people, and there can be consent involved. But I mean, there are different situations and context, I think, for each incident. And he said as much. He said that it was irresponsible the way that he went about it.
And also think about time and place for consent. I mean, and I feel weird even using, hey, is it okay if I whip my dick out? And you're a lesser known individual, and then it's Louis C.K., who is literally one of the biggest names in I would say in the 21st century, 20th century comedy, Yeah,
that's not like an easing into it.
Cenk, he asks Rebecca Corey on set, when they're on set, hey, like, could I masturbate in front of you? The answer is obviously no, and he knows that. After she said, she's like, hey, dude, you have a pregnant wife and also a wife. So no. And he was like, I'm sorry, I have issues. He knows it's wrong. He acknowledges that his behavior is wrong. But he knows that that's not the time or place to ask for consent if you can masturbate when you're in a place of work. It's where they work.
So, Grace, I don't want anybody to misunderstand. In that scenario, I totally agree with you.
Okay.
So in that scenario, he is clearly in a position of power on the same show that they're working on, and he puts her in an awkward, untenable situation, and it's not fair to her. So that's why I'm trying to delineate between the different cases. In another case, he's a staff writer. He's not the legendary Louis C.K. yet. It is 14 years ago, and in one case, he has a bigger billing on the same comedy show that they're in. Okay, I guess you have a responsibility to be more careful in that situation, but it's not like I definitely control the fate of the universe, and if you don't do this, you'll be in a lot of trouble. It's just it's a different dynamic. So I think it's important to make those distinctions. Otherwise, any infraction gets you put in the same category as Weinstein and Ailes and Cosby, and I don't think that's right either.
So you don't think Louis C.K. belongs in that category with that pool of men?
Definitely not. No. So in fact, Weinstein and Brett Ratner, very similar fact scenario, right? Except with one enormous difference. Ratner says to Olivia Munn, in the first instance, he doesn't ask her, he doesn't say anything. She works for him on a set that he's the director on. She walks in at the time as an intern or whatever into his trailer, and he immediately masturbates in front of her. No consent asked, clearly the boss. That is 100% guilty, right? So Ailes, they work for him. O'Reilly, they work for him, and O'Reilly non-consensual masturbation. And then Harvey Weinstein asks for sex. She says no in a situation where he has her cornered in a little like remote area of a restaurant, right, where there's nobody else around. She says no, and then he says, then shut up and stand there while he masturbates. Clearly non-consensual position of power. Those are, I mean, if we can't say that that's worse, I'm afraid that we're gonna then make those crimes like, it diminishes those crimes. Those crimes are really, really, really bad.
I hear you. I just feel it. I don't think that we should be qualifying when it comes to sexual misconduct. It feels wrong to say, well, he only did this, because then we're sort of allowing him to perhaps enter into this space. Simone and I were also talking about this before we went to tape. Is how many years until we forgive him and he puts out a Netflix special that's called "I'm Sorry" or "I Messed Up"? You know, and that's something that look. If you do this at any job, you're fired. He's proven that when given a position of power, he will abuse that. Well, because you were talking about the allegations before. It wasn't so. He was just a staff writer, but then he becomes more powerful and he gets more bold with his actions. So I think that I understand what you say about you don't want to diminish the other accusations of the other one, but I don't think that we're doing that by just calling out the very bad behavior of Louis C.K. I don't think that diminishes the other women who have come forward in the case of like Weinstein and Brett Ratner. Let's treat each case as an individual. Louis C.K. fucked up. We should be able to call him out for that, and he should be able to say, "I'm sorry," or "I apologize" in your stupid statement.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
I'm going to leave the qualifying or ranking of sexual misconducts and sex crimes up to the victims. But I do want to talk about the timing of this statement. He has this film that's coming out, I Love You, Daddy, and he wrote and directed the film and even wrote character into the film that masturbates or pretends to masturbate in front of people. And so I haven't seen the film, but a lot of people who have seen the film say, wow, this is very familiar behavior. This actually is pretty reminiscent of the rumors that have been going around about Louis C.K. for years. So he spoke to the New York Times in September and said, these are just, when the New York Times brought up these allegations, he said, those are just rumors, as you read that statement, Grace. And now, a couple months later, he's coming out after the New York Times published this investigation and these reports, and now he's saying, now he's got this long, remorseful apology and this very in-depth statement. Now, honestly, before I set foot in this set, I think I had a more open-minded approach to his his apology, and I wanted to say, wow, if someone is going to come forward and say, yes, I admitted to all this and what I did was wrong, then we have to acknowledge statements like that so that other abusers feel comfortable coming forward before they are caught. I don't know if Louis C.K. would have done this if he hadn't been caught. But I question the timing of this, because it seems like he was more willing to profit off of his victims and their stories than he was willing to acknowledge that those stories actually happened. He only did that when he was caught red-handed.
Okay, I think last question. If there was no dynamic where they're working together, let's say it's a fan, and he asks, "Can I masturbate in front of you?" It is deeply uncomfortable, okay, and you could say it's quote unquote wrong, but I mean, is that a problem? Is he then in trouble? Does he have to apologize for that? Because he's way more powerful than the fan.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a good question. I think it comes down to time and place and consent and the dynamic between, if it was a fan that, I really wanted to hook up with Louis C.K. that night, but that's not what we're hearing from any of these women. None of these women were like, we were kind of hitting it off, we were that's not what was happening. It was, they admired this comedian. He said that he wanted to spend time with them, or she felt so moved that she could even call him up and invite him to a show, to which he starts masturbating over the phone. So I don't think that it's a question that is hypothetical, because we don't know. That's not what the accounts that have come forward, because the women that have come forward were women that somehow worked with him, that were in the entertainment space, and especially in the world of comedy, that can be pretty broad, whether they were working on set, whether they were fellow comedians. So that's the dynamic that we're dealing with the accounts that have come forward.
I think, Cenk, you have to understand what it's like to be a woman alone in a room with a powerful man. And that may be something that you'll never understand. But I think you saw that with Weinstein's accusers. I mean, he asked the same question of them. And a lot of times they felt unsafe. They felt like, if I say no to this man who's bigger than me, who can overpower me, I don't know that I'll be able to get myself out of this situation. So I'm not giving you a yes or no to that answer. I'm just saying that sometimes you got to understand the dynamic.
Look, I understand that, and that's why we have these tough, sometimes awkward and uncomfortable conversations. Mm-hmm. To hear each other's
necessary conversations.
Yes, to hear each other's perspectives. So the perspective of a woman in that tough situation is important for everyone out there to hear. But I'm also telling you that from the perspective of a guy, if you say a guy is just too powerful and he can no longer ask for any sexual act, or if he misreads a situation and there's a miscommunication, then he's guilty because he's more powerful. You're gonna have a revolt in the other direction, and guys are gonna say, no way, then I'm not buying any of this. I'm telling you right now, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I wonder if there's no easy answer to that question. I think I'm just willing to leave it there.
And moving on with more tough conversations before we go to a break. But you know what? Look, we're gonna have a pretty heavy second hour. It's important that we do have these conversations. This is a bit of a breaking story. This was added a little bit later. Actress Ellen Page released a Facebook post today detailing her own experience with sexual abuse and misconduct in the entertainment industry. In this lengthy statement, she calls out director Brett Ratner for outing her on the set of X-Men: The Last Stand. She also calls out a director that took her out to dinner when she was 16 and fondled her under the table. It is a really long statement. I urge you to please read the whole thing. It was incredibly moving for me to read, and just to get the full context of what she's talking about. But here are some quotes I highlighted. Look at the history of what's happening to minors who've described sexual abuse in Hollywood. Some of them are no longer with us, lost to substance abuse and suicide. Their victimizers still working, protected even as I write this. You know who they are. They've been discussed behind closed doors as often as Weinstein was. If I, a person with significant privilege, remain reluctant and at such risk simply by saying a person's name, what are the options for those who do not have what I have? Let's remember the epidemic of violence against women in our society disproportionately affects low-income women, particularly women of color, trans and queer women, and indigenous women who are silenced by their economic circumstances and profound mistrust of a justice system that acquits the guilty in the face of overwhelming evidence and continues to oppress people of color. She also goes on to say that what we've done so far in this day of reckoning in Hollywood is not enough. She wants to see actions go further. She says, I've heard the industry decry Weinstein's behavior and vow to effect meaningful change. But let's be truthful. The list is long and still protected by the status quo. We have work to do. We cannot look the other way. I did a Woody Allen movie, and it is the biggest regret of my career. When she sort of talks about what she wants to see, what is the growth of the industry, which is, I think, great about this statement, is that she talks about the issues and then what she wants to see changed. She says, I want to see these men have to face what they have done. I want them to not have power anymore. I want them to sit and think about who they are without their lawyers, their millions, their fancy cars, houses upon houses, their Playboy status and swagger. This is a long-awaited reckoning. It must be. It's sad that codes of conduct have to be enforced to ensure we experience fundamental human decency and respect. Inclusion and representation are the answer. So, Simone, I want to toss it over to you. She says inclusion and representation are the answer. I agree. Do you?
Absolutely. I think that what is happening in Hollywood right now is symptomatic of an industry that hasn't traditionally had a lot of women working behind the scenes and in the higher ranks of a lot of these studios. And I think that if you were to remedy that situation, the lack of inclusion and diversity behind the scenes, then I think that you would see a lot of these situations, or at least I hope, I can't predict the future, but at least I hope that a lot of these situations could be avoided, because maybe if a woman who has been victimized doesn't feel comfortable talking to one of her male colleagues about this, maybe if there were more female colleagues around her, she might feel more comfortable or more safe explaining this sort of situation to them. Now, that doesn't mean that women haven't aided and abetted these men. We know that they have, and some women have facilitated these sorts of behaviors. But I wonder if we wouldn't see less of these, sexual misconduct cases if we had more women working behind the scenes in Hollywood. Yeah.
So let's say that in the scenario that she explains when she was 16. She goes to a dinner with this male director, and he begins to fondle her, right? And says and propositions her. If there was also a woman at the dinner, would the male director have been as outrageous, or would he have maybe checked himself, thinking, "Oh, wait, maybe she might not think it's kosher. Maybe that'll get me in trouble." I don't know, but it's a question worth asking. And for the guys who are like, "Oh, she's talking about these powerful guys shouldn't have houses upon houses." No, her point is that they shouldn't then take that. They can have all the houses in the world they want as long as they're not sexually assaulting 16-year-olds. And so her point is about the abuse of power. And I think that this is, and I've said this now many times, this is an amazing moment where women are rising up and saying enough. And what you guys, and maybe you didn't think it was a big deal because you didn't see it, because it didn't happen to you. But now here we are, we're telling you what happened, and it's kind of happening all at once because everybody's gathering up the courage to finally come out and say their tales. But it's not okay to fondle a 16-year-old under the table and ask her to sleep with you, and then she's got other stories about how her grip then sexually assaulted her. Her grip is a particular kind of job on a set. And then how another powerful man, a director, asked her to sleep with another man in his late 20s and to tell them about it. All of these propositions. And this is the same thing that happens with racism. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So for a second, try to walk in their shoes. You're 16, you just got to Hollywood and you're trying to be an actor, and this is an amazing moment, and a director asks you to dinner and you're gonna make it and you feel fantastic, and next thing you know, he's all over you. How would you feel? So I'm so glad that they're coming out and taking a stand and calling out what it is, because this is hopefully then it gets those powerful guys to pause and to worry about what might happen to them, because that is unfortunately the only thing that a lot of people care about. The next time they do this, will I get outed? Great. If they're about to do something terrible, they should pause. Yeah. And they should worry about that.
And for so long, Hollywood has sort of likened itself to be the beacon of morality. We're so progressive. We're so accepting, and this is the example that we should be setting for the rest of the world. And obviously, at the core, it was rotten. It wasn't good. Yeah. And right now, we're having this day of reckoning, and I think that is good, because you need to weed out the people that were encouraging this toxic culture in this industry. But what I like about Ellen Page's statement is that she takes that, she's like, this is what's going on in Hollywood, but we know that this is an epidemic of violence against women in our society that disproportionately affects, and then she takes it so it's more than just in Hollywood. Yeah, we're talking about it because these are public figures, names that you've heard of before, but let's carry this over. This isn't the only industry that is rotten, that have been disproportionately victimizing women and men with the abuse of power, sexual misconduct. Let's weed all those rotten people out, because they have no business working if you are going to, behave yourself in that way.
The true test is going to be, and I totally agree with you, Grace. Before I move on, I think we need to address sexism and issues of sexual misconduct in politics, for one. I mean, there are so many other industries that sort of need that cleansing, that purging. But it's going to be really interesting to see how Hollywood discusses this, how they react to it, what is the story that Hollywood will tell the world come award season, when it's supposed to be all, golden statues and regalia and Hollywood is perfect. Is Hollywood going to be honest? That is what needs to happen. Save me the high and mighty political speeches if you can't get honest about what is happening right here.
So I think what connects Hollywood and politics is positions of power. And so this is directly one of those issues where people abuse the power that they have for people that work under them or that are trying to get positions. Roger Ailes in TV, even before he was at Fox News, would have people lining up for auditions to get on talk shows. And he said, if you don't sleep with me, or like undescribable acts, etc., then you're not going to make it onto TV. And so now this is Hollywood in terms of movies. The music industry might be the worst of all. And in any situation where you have a person that can either make or break your career, and unfortunately in media, that is very, very true. There's only a certain number of movies that are made. There's only a certain number of TV jobs that are out there, a certain number of people who make it in the music industry, and you put powerful men into those positions, and sometimes powerful women, but in these cases it's been much more men. And they prey not just on women, but also on men, depending on their proclivities. And you give them that kind of power, then you have to be really, really careful. And if you're not careful, this is what happens. And for decades and decades, we were not remotely careful. So when Simone talks about cleansing out people, of course we're not talking about all men or all people in power. We're talking about the bad actors.
The bad guys.
The bad guys who are using their position of power and abusing it for their own pleasure and et cetera, and preying on women and men to do that. And yes, we absolutely positively have to clean that out so that people make it on their own merit and not on this nonsense. And so you don't have all these victims who, by the way, in almost all the stories are scarred for the rest of their lives. And we only find out about it now. So that lasts with them forever.
Yeah. I think one of the, if I could say, positive things that I took away from Louis C.K.'s statement was that his victims get vindication from that. They actually have their abuser, coming out and saying your stories are true. Unfortunately, that never happens. So if there's one positive thing that I could take away from that, I hope that we see more people just coming out and admitting to what they have done, because that is a validation that victims of rape and sexual assault rarely get.
Yeah.
All right, we've got more controversial stories when we return. We got to take a quick break here, and we'll be right back. You like podcasts? Oh, I like podcasts. Get the TYT podcast, get the whole show, and TYT interviews and old school and aggressive progressive. So many wonderful TYT shows. No ads. Become a member right now. TYTnetwork.com/join. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.